Hi, I'm so glad you're watching. Isn't it amazing at the moment looking at world leaders and noticing the different ways they communicate? Some of them are doing a terrible job, and I'm pretty sure you know who I'm talking about. Some are doing an okay job, and a select few are really nailing it. And in fact, they've been nailing it for quite some time. Now, if I were to ask you to think of a leader who's really doing that, I wonder who'd come to mind for you. What's that? Sorry? I'm getting something. J.A., the initials J.A. Jacinda Ardern. So, I'm not the only one with a bit of a crush on Jacinda. What is it about this woman that half the world has fallen in love with her communication style? See, we know, don't we, that it's not enough just to communicate, whether you're a world leader, a team leader, or a parent. Because if you're a leader, you probably have staff who are distanced, disengaged, and disproportionately wearing Ugg boots right now, right? So you can't just communicate. You need to be able to shift people's thoughts, beliefs, and actions. It's time to ignite your influence. So Jacinda Ardern understands what I call the duality of influence. It's yin and yang. There are two equal sides to it, and you need both of these qualities in equal measure. So the first half of this is your character, your personality, the way you connect and build rapport with people. And doesn't Jacinda do that so well with the videos on her couch, in her tracky dacks? And your character's also your integrity, your values, your ethics, what you stand for. But that's only half of the yin and yang. The other side is your competence, your capability, your credibility. And who can forget Jacinda's steely resolve when she addressed the nation after the Christchurch shooting? Character, competence. To ignite your influence, you need both of those. Now, one way to demonstrate character is to have very clear and positive intentions anytime you go into a Zoom meeting or a conversation. I mean, think about the last time you had a conversation that didn't go so well. Chances are one of you had self-oriented intentions. People can sniff that a mile away. So it's important to have a genuine intention to get a win-win for everybody. But you need to make that clear, because otherwise it can be easily misconstrued, which is a little bit like walking into a room with a t-shirt on with your intention emblazoned across the front, but the problem is the t-shirt's on inside out, so people can't see that. What they do see is what's on the back of the shirt when you leave the room. That's what lingers. Now, Stephen M.R. Covey, in his book, The Speed of Trust, put it this way. We tend to judge ourselves on our intentions. You know, something goes wrong and you say, well, I had good intentions. But other people will judge you on your actions. So that's what lingers when you leave the room. And that's what they talk about. So my first tip for you is, in a meeting, be really clear. Say, my intention for everybody here today is that we all walk away with X, Y, Z. You fill in the blank. Make it clear. Is it enough to have good intentions though? Now, many years ago, I worked for a university, and I won't tell you which one, but it was in Western Sydney. It was one of these universities that was formed from an amalgamation of teachers' colleges, so it wasn't one of the Sandstone Seven. But I remember this university had been given a donation of hundreds of library books from the University of Sydney, and there'd been media coverage about it, hundreds of books. But there was a problem. The new university didn't want the books. They didn't need the books. Some of them were duplicates. Some of them were out of date. Some of them were even infested with mites. What a dilemma. So the library staff came up with this great plan. They got a truck and they loaded these hundreds of library books into the truck. They drove it out way to the back of the campus. They dug a bloody big hole and they buried the books. A university burying books, can you imagine? It got better actually, because the student council found out and they tipped off the media. Next thing, they've brought me in as the media specialist to try to do damage control. And I certainly couldn't stop all of it. Can you imagine having a front page like this, seeing a headline like this about your organisation? It took a long time to move on from that. So, 2 lessons from that experience. Never bury anything unless you want it to grow. And secondly, never underestimate the potential for well-meaning people to do dumb things. Did those library staff have good intentions? Of course. Were their actions really justified? Not so much. So you need the competence and the capability as well. Now this is borne out in research. The Edelman Trust Barometer, major piece of global data released every year, tells us that subject matter experts are the most trusted and credible sources of information when talking about your business or organisation. Competence, followed closely by highly relatable people. That's character. Interestingly, CEOs, political leaders, much further down the equation. And what that tells us is, if you want to have influence, having a fancy title alone is not going to be enough. Now, subject matter expertise, it's much more than having a university degree, would you agree? It means taking your expertise and embodying it, embedding it so far inside you that it becomes part of your DNA, that it goes from the reflective part of your brain where you've got to think about it into your impulsive brain where you can just call on it. It's there whenever you need it, especially when you're under pressure. Now, there's a lot of talk right now about the 2020 Olympics in 2021, which reminds me of the year 2000 and the Sydney Olympics, when I was an announcer at the hockey stadium. So if you were there, that would have been my voice you heard at the hockey. 20,000 people in the stands every game, millions watching on television. And I remember I practiced hard and trained hard, and I was ready for that role. But then I was dismayed when I saw the draw for the very first game. I was to announce the game between Australia and Poland. So I was going to have to introduce all of the Polish players who had names about this long, like Ergeniusz Goczkowski. Sorry to all the Polish people watching. So I was absolutely terrified. So can you come back with me to my very first game at the Sydney Olympics? I'm in the announcer's booth. The stands are packed. There are millions watching around the world, including many Polish-speaking people. And I'm literally hanging onto the desk because that's the only thing that was stopping me from passing out in fear. And the producer next to me starts counting me in. 3, 2, 1. I froze. It felt like about half an hour. But actually, I think it was more like half a second, because something amazing happened. I took a breath, and then suddenly all of the words came out of my mouth in the right order. Thank goodness. See, I'd practiced for that moment. I'd prepared for that moment. I reckon I was born for that moment. I'd taken that expertise and I'd embodied it. And so that's what you need to do. That's my second tip. Take your expertise, if you want to have influence, and make it part of you. You know, having influence starts with an outstanding reputation. Would you agree? And your reputation is what other people think and say about you. You can't control that, but you can impact it by being very clear on what you stand for and making sure that you communicate that consistently. That's character. And making sure that that lines up when people directly experience you. That's competence. So my final tip is look at those 2 areas, character and competence, and decide which one of those you're going to build up to strengthen your influence. Because if you put those 2 together, people will only say amazing things about you. And that is how you ignite your influence.